Table for One, episode 23, One Dick Dungeon, with an interview with Chris Cieslik. Hey everybody, welcome to Table for One. This is episode 23. We are back with Anthony and Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what is up?
All right, guys, we have a very special episode today. We are talking about one of the hottest games in Board Game Geek and the Facebook solo groups lately. If you've been online for either of those, you've probably seen several photos from people's play sessions. And not only are we talking about that, but we have the designer here with us as well. Please welcome the designer of One Dick Dungeon, Chris Cieslik.
Hey, good to be with you.
Are you Asmati Games?
Yeah. How
does that company work? Is that something that you have founded with a couple of other designers? Is that your baby?
So I started back in 2005. It's just an idea to make one game. And it slowly built up while I had other real jobs. And we released a game called We Didn't Play Test This at All. And
Love that.
We got really lucky on Amazon because our game looked a little bit like Cards Against Humanity.
Yep.
And Amazon was like, oh, people who bought this also bought this. And suddenly we got this giant influx of orders, and I had a bunch of capital, and I could actually produce real games like Innovation and all the other stuff that we've released since then. Since then, we're up to 3 full-time employees, and I work out of my apartment here near Boston. But we're small, but I do all of the design and development along with Carl when he's in for a game like Innovation or the Matina expansion that's coming up soon.
And then Red 7, which is definitely...
Yeah, it was a collaboration.
Mm-hmm. How did just as long as I got you on the line, the Red 7 app seems to be really beautiful, doing really well. Is that something that you just outsourced? Did you have any involvement in that?
Yeah, a company from Poland wanted to do it, and we talked with them and got them some art assets and some ideas. It was a little bumpy at first with the release, but it's doing all right now. It's good to have it out there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so with regards to One Dick Dungeon, what was the beginnings of the game? I think we could start at the beginning. Conceptually, is it something that a design that you kind of sat on a little while, you kind of let it simmer, or did it come together pretty quickly and, you just kind of got through it? So
it's funny because it has a couple of different routes. I've been playing around with six-sided dice-based games for a long time. We made a small game called Sixes back in 2008 or 9 that never really saw full release, but there was an app version of it, and we sold a few hundred copies that we made by hand, essentially. And since then, I was always playing around with sort of dice placement games, and eventually other designers came up with some neat mechanics around dice placement as workers or other ideas like that.
So and you're talking Alien Frontiers.
Yeah. Lagrange. There's like a million of them now. And I'd had some prototypes that got to sort of the half-baked stage. One was called Potion Quest. And a couple of years ago, I was like, oh, roguelikes are fun. I could make this work as a dungeon crawler. But it was weird because all of my designs were coming down to single player, and that wasn't really a thing. How do you release a one-player board game? But I started seeing more and more people talking about how they were playing solo games, and I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just make this and see what happens? And it came together. We released a prototype beta version of it at Gen Con a year and a half ago. And it was pretty well received. It wasn't completely done yet. We did a lot more development between then and its actual release this past year with the Kickstarter and everything. And, it eventually morphed into a game that could take 1 or 2 players. And we added on a 4-player mode if you wanted to sort of hack in 2 decks and switch your parties up. But at its core, it was always best as a 1-player game, which was very interesting to me.
Yeah, usually a lot of times there'll be designs that are meant for 2, 3, or 4, and then they'll kind of shoehorn in one, and you could tell. But this game just I mean, I think that's part of why it's so popular, that it really does feel like a one-player game. It just pops off just really naturally. Even if you play with two characters, it's like, okay, there's one player, this perfectly works.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of the time the games in general that are the best solo games are games where you had a 2 or 3 or 4 player game and you luck into a really effective single player mod or a different rule set. I can't think of many games where I've heard the designer say, I started out with a one-player game and built out from there. It's starting to actually happen more. I've heard a couple people talk about that now, because this very large, almost silent market has just emerged and been like, hey, we do want to play single-player games. I think Kingdom Death, among other things, kind of brought that right into the forefront, because a lot of people are playing Kingdom Death alone as a campaign, which is neat.
Yeah, I mean, you get that kind of feel of like, it's like a video game, which the vast majority of people play alone, but it's not digital, which is the whole idea, is that we kind of want something to unplug on. So I really appreciate that. And this one was funny, too, because I was not quite into solo games when this is pretty recent for me, kind of getting into this whole space, but I wasn't aware of the Kickstarter when it came out, but all of the buzz around it, in the last few months, since you delivered and since it's hit retail, caught my eye. And then when it was on the store shelf, I was like, sure, I'll give it a go, and kind of down the rabbit hole from there into seeing all these people playing the game. And so it's been really interesting to kind of come at it from the consumer side, because I so frequently don't these days. I'm usually aware of things as they come out, but in this case, it was kind of a sleeper that this silent community amplified.
Was it a sleeper at the time? Like, how did the Kickstarter do? Did the Kickstarter kind of predict the popularity of it now, or did it just blow up after the fact, like Anthony was mentioning?
I mean, the Kickstarter did pretty well. We raised 123,000 and had, I think, we had like 4,000 games that we sent out. I forget how many backers. So it was well liked when it was on Kickstarter. Granted, I was not expecting quite as fast of sales and adoption from the community after release, especially since we missed Christmas. That was my big concern. We got delayed a couple times, and finally it got out to distribution, the second to last week in December. So stores didn't really have it on the shelves for the holiday season at all. And I'm like, okay, given that, we're probably going to take 3 or 4 months to sell out. We printed 10,000 copies. And like I said, 4,000 went out to Kickstarter backers. But we actually just sent out our last copy to distributors today. So we are officially sold out.
Woohoo!
Pretty cool.
It's almost like a blessing in disguise, because I don't know that there's a lot of hot releases happening in January, February. It's almost like you kind of stepped in and said, oh, okay, here's a new release that's appealing to people.
And hey, as a bonus, we did technically release in 2016, so we're up for the Golden Geek Awards right when we're at our peak of buzz.
Oh, that is pretty cool, too. Okay, and so this is more of a design question, and I'm actually getting this from the Solo Facebook group. I don't know if you know about that group. There's tons of members, like 3,000 members.
Yeah, I just hopped in there a couple days ago. I found out about it.
So this is from a user, Brian Udath. He is interested to know how you balance a game like this. There's so many variables and monsters and encounters, but it all kind of works well. There's no point at which the community hasn't like risen up and said, oh, this is broken here or whatever. Like, it all seems to be pretty smooth. What was the playtesting like? What was the development process like?
It honestly is just playing it a lot of times. One of the nice things we got between the Kickstarter and release was Gen Con. And we own basically a 800 square foot event room at Gen Con where we run events all weekend long. We ran 500 demos of One Deck Dungeon. And that's just people from everywhere. Good players, bad players, new players, experienced veterans. And we got to see all of them play the game. And, it wasn't its fully done state then, but we got so much playtesting data from that, aside from my own personal, ideas about how the math would work and how much I'd played myself. It's always good to get all of that real data. And we saw what cards were too hard, what cards were too easy. We may have over-tweaked in a couple of places. The game is a little bit harder than I wanted it to be. But no, it really does boil down to play it a ton, but also there's no real way to describe it. You just have to have a sense in your head of how the numbers are going to come together and work. I don't know how to describe it other than, I can see when a card is too much or too little in terms of difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
Like that designer's sixth sense.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if is that like a math background thing or a statistics background thing or just, designer sense?
Yeah, no, my degree is in math and computer science, so I've done a lot of programming, a lot of math, and that all definitely helps a lot because I can see all the numbers in my head. It's not all you need, but it is almost a prerequisite for balancing a game of this size. Because even though it's a small game, there's a lot of moving parts.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's almost like about a couple months ago, Anthony and I did an episode on the Tiny Epic series, how it's a bunch of games, but they're almost like science experiments where how much game can we fit in how little a pack?
Yep.
And, this is the cooperative science lab and this is the area control one. It really felt like you took this dice genre, of which there's a bunch of really good games, but you almost set out to cram as much meat and decision-making and all that stuff into one little pack. Was that a conscious decision?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I could make a dice chucker that's just random and kind of, you go through the dungeon and see what happens. And that wouldn't be hard at all. What I really wanted to do was get all of those feelings you have when you're playing a roguelike computer game where you're making decisions, you're deciding how to build your character out, you're wagering whether you should continue exploring a floor or whether you should run down the stairs because there's something big behind you that's going to come and get you, how much you should fight versus how much you should try to conserve your health. And we couldn't get every single aspect of a roguelike into the game because that would just be too much. But I feel like the most important decision points are kind of preserved. And even though the dice are random, every decision you make is really important. That decision between do I take this as an item or a skill or experience is an interesting decision almost every time you have to make it. And I like interesting decisions in games. They're my favorite thing. So I was glad that I was able to make that system work. That whole system went through several revisions. I think the version that we released at Gen Con 2015 had a different set of 3 choices. You could get treasure or an item or a skill, and you had to pay for an item or a skill through the treasure you'd accumulated. But it wound up being easier to just front load the decision, so you had a straight limit of how many skills or how many skills or items you could have, as opposed to having to sort of save up and purchase them.
You mentioned before that there was other aspects of roguelikes that kind of were stayed on the cutting room floor. Care to enlighten?
Oh, I mean, roguelikes are a very complicated system. Identifying potions and items is one thing that's like one of the core elements of any roguelike. You pick up a sword and you don't really know how good it is until you start using it. There was just no way to really make that mystery work in the game. It was too much tracking of stuff you couldn't know that just didn't work. And food systems. There's a lot of little things that don't make sense in a simple card game that just didn't make it in.
Yeah, one of the things just on Twitter I've seen conversations pop up that I thought was interesting. It's not really about the mechanics at all. It's just an interesting, I guess, more aesthetic design decision is the characters in the game. And I know. I don't know how much pushback you've gotten, if any, but making all the characters female seems like, applauding the choice. I love that, but I'm just interested to know kind of where that came from, and then what kind of feedback have you gotten from that?
Lots. So the original decision was fairly innocuous. The first 2 heroes we drew were female. I believe it was the warrior and the rogue, and they both came out awesome. And at that point, I was just talking. I'm like, why don't we make them all women? And everyone's like, that's great. Let's do it. And we did. And the original plan was that we're just going to release it, not even say a thing about it. Just here are the heroes. And that's actually how we wound up launching the Kickstarter campaign, was just here are the 4 heroes. We're not saying anything. And quickly people noticed. As it turns out, that's unusual.
Yeah.
Especially because they're not like dressed up in chainmail bikinis. And,
that too. That was the other decision that we had made already, was that the female heroes were going to be well clad, and that's why we started with the rogue, who's got kind of an Assassin's Creed robe-like situation going on, and the warrior, who's very strong and bulky, and not your traditional female warrior character. Typically, people put the female warrior in the equivalent of the Conan costume, as little clothes as possible, because quote unquote she has to be maneuverable, and a big sword and all that stuff you'd expect from a chainmail bikini thing. And I'm like, no, why don't we draw a more realistic warrior, not completely covered so that she has like a shoulder free, but with armor and somebody who looks really strong. And she came out great. That was the first piece of art we had done, and it's still my favorite out of the 5 heroes for the initial game. But people noticed quickly, and most of the feedback was very positive. We got hundreds, if not by this point thousands, of emails and comments and notes from women and men and people with kids who were like, "Thank you for doing this. Nobody else has ever done this. This is amazing. We love it." We did get a fair number of nasty comments of people who either directly said, "This is ridiculous. How dare you? How can I play this game with my son?" Which is ridiculous. Or people who were the backhand undermining kind of, "Oh, well, I mean, it would be good if you didn't make this choice." And, I've got a pretty fair amount of experience in moderating forums and internet communities, and I know that they were trying to start an argument. I shut them down fast. One of those happened on BGG forums in one of the solo player guilds there a couple weeks ago. Somebody tried to start a thing, and I'm just like, nope. In fact, my entire reply was the word "nope" with exclamation point. Boy, did he not like that. Because there's no point engaging. When someone's coming with an agenda of it's not right for women to be equal, I don't have anything to say. That wasn't really the point. It was just, why can't they be 4 women? That's cool. And since it got so much attention, we've continued making more female heroes, and the expansion will be the same way.
That definitely, you just naturally segued into some of the, this is what people really want to know. Like I put a question up on at the Facebook group, what should we ask Chris Cieslik? And they're like, more content. Yeah. So, well, I mean, it's also a good opportunity for you to advertise your Twitch and your social media, because you are releasing, even before the expansion, you're giving out some extra content. So maybe you could tell the people about that a little bit.
Yeah, actually, it was just last night we had a Twitch stream where we released a free DLC pack, because it's a computer game. Why not have a downloadable expansion with a new dungeon and a new hero? The hero being Kaliana, who is our mascot. And she's not from the specific One Deck Dungeon universe, so she doesn't abide by rules like health or things like that. Okay. So she's a wildly different experience to play with, which is fun. And I just think that's neat to be able to release extra content. We'll probably do one more pack between now and when the expansion comes out, which leads me to the expansion. So the expansion, which we plan to kickstart a week or 2 after PAX East. Again, we're going to get all that playtesting data from the convention, having tried it out there, and make sure that we're actually on the right path. It's forest themed. We're calling it One Deck Dungeon Forest of Shadows, I think. We've kicked back and forth a few times on the exact wording of the subtitle, but it's got a lot of foresty heroes and creatures. One of the core mechanics is poison damage, which are a different type of damage token you can take instead of direct damage, and if you still have poison around, it might hurt you every single encounter you have. But there are a few ways to remove it, including exploring, looking for herbs, and curing things. But it's coming along. We've got most of the art done for it. 3 of the hero arts are done. We've done some sneak peeks of them on social media. And it should be a lot of fun. I'm excited to get it out. And given how well the Kickstarter did last year and how much buzz there is about the game now, I'm expecting the Kickstarter to do well.
Will the original game be available with all the Kickstarter extras that were in the last pack?
Yes. So there aren't really any Kickstarter extras. There are only the wooden hearts, which is just a different token. Everything else is in every single copy of the game. We try to avoid Kickstarter exclusives as much as possible because literally my least favorite experience in board gaming is buying a game and realizing that I did not get the entire game because I was not part of the Kickstarter.
Amen.
Yes.
Yeah. I am so done with that. It is an instant not buy for me if I encounter a game like that. I was furious when, what was it? The second Roll Through the Ages. I bought it and I realized I was missing an entire board because I wasn't part of the Kickstarter. And I'm like, what? I just paid $40 for this game. Where's the rest of the game? So I don't want to do that to people. And I want to make sure that if there's something that's Kickstarter exclusive, it's a cosmetic fun thing and not a I'm missing part of the game thing.
So people will be able to pick up the original game along with the forest of whatever.
Yes. So on the Kickstarter, we will have both games either in paper or plastic. Depending on the amount of balance changes we do between now and the print run, and we are looking at changing. Specifically, the archer is going to change for sure, but we might tweak a handful of skills and monsters. We'll probably have an upgrade pack as part of the Kickstarter where you can just add on those extra 5 cards for like a couple dollars something. So you can get, if you bought the original game and now you're buying the expansion, you can get the cards that should be replaced in your old deck.
And then, so is this going to be 2-deck dungeon now? And can we expect 3-deck dungeon next year?
Well, I mean, if people keep liking it, we will certainly keep producing content for it. My general idea for how combining the decks are going to work is you'll always take half of the 2 sets you're going to combine. So any given game is only going to be 2 sets. You won't be able to combine 3 expansions at once because that would just be too many cards and too much fine tuning of exactly what the deck's going to wind up being.
So like one half would be forest, and then one half would be the regular or like dungeon, and then maybe like down the road there'll be a desert pack and
yeah.
I'm not putting words in your mouth. There will not be a desert pack. We don't know that.
Sands of Destiny. Can make up titles all day long.
That's right. For every just look up the Forgotten Realms and D&D. Look at all the zones and just like, okay, here we go. Mountains of this.
Dark Sun. What?
There'll be a thread up on Facebook the day after we put this up. People will be like, Chris said it. It's happening.
Oh, no. All right, I'm announcing 4 more innovation expansions. And get ourselves into lots of trouble. But no, I like the idea. The game is very simple and good, and I think it can lend itself to a number of different small mechanical additions that expansions sort of lend themselves to doing. And for as long as people want more content, and as long as I can think of more ideas, we'll keep putting out sets because that's what we do.
Oh yeah, and I think we've said it a couple of times. I mean, the community has just jumped all over this game. I think, maybe this is going a little bit further afield, but there hasn't been a really great dice rolling solo. A couple of games have come pretty close. Like Hostage Negotiator came out a couple years ago. It was really super popular. But that game gets a little bit of blowback as well for various reasons. And so this game just seemed to step into a void that no one really knew was there. And then when people really got into it, it's like, wow, I love chucking dice, and it's a chucking dice, but it's not just chucking dice. And yeah, I think it just scratches an itch that we didn't know was itching.
Yeah, I think a lot of designers have been afraid of dice because, randomness in modern game design is more or less frowned upon unless you are a very short filler. And it's hard to rein in that randomness in a way that still produces a fun game. And something like a roguelike where the expectation is randomness and death provided the perfect opportunity to make that work. So one other thing with solo gaming, although it's more of a co-op game, is one other game that we're working on right now called 1001 Odysseys. And that is a story-based game, which, again, is designed for a small group, but we're hoping to make it playable solo in a good way. It's sort of a more directed Tales of the Arabian Nights, where you're more on rails going through a story, as opposed to getting all sorts of random encounters. But that is on the docket for testing this year. So your solo game fans might be interested in that down the line as well.
Yeah, that was like the wrap up was like, just let us know what Asmodee Games has us in the future. It sounds like you're definitely one of the designers that just notices us solo gamers, and because a lot of designers we had this, but when we talked with Ignacy last time, Ignacy was like, yeah, some designers just aren't into it and everything, but there's a small but growing number of you guys just, oh wow, look at this. They're all talking about this. I mean, if you look at the Facebook group, people post like 10 pictures a day of stuff.
Well, the irony is that people have this perception of the solo gamer as an antisocial gamer, when in reality the solo gamers go onto Facebook and Twitter and Board Game Geek and talk the most about the games they play. So they are the most social gamers in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is most of us aren't antisocial by choice. We got kids or weird work hours or whatever it is. Yeah,
for something to play for an hour and then hopefully get in some group game time at some point.
Thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate you coming on and talking about not just One Dick Dungeon, how it came together and everything behind it, but what's coming up in the future. We're definitely going to keep an eye on it, and I'm sure people are going to keep talking about it, especially with new stuff coming real soon. All right. Well, thanks for having me on. Yeah, no,
this is amazing. Thank you. What's the name of that Tales of Arabian Nights tweak you're coming out again?
1001 Odysseys. So it's a play on Tales of the Arabian Nights 1000 and 2001: A Space Odyssey. 001 was a neat number.
We'll definitely invite you back on if you have a little bit of time to talk about that whenever you're ready to, get that Kickstarter launched or get the word out. We're real excited for that.
Great. Sounds good.
All right. So that's going to wrap up everything for episode 23 of Table for One. Just want to thank Chris one more time for coming on the episode. Really appreciate his time and talking about a game that is just blowing up right now in the solo space. It's really cool to have somebody on who actually sees that and understands it and is thinking about it in their game design, because it means more cool stuff for us to play. So keep your eyes out for that Kickstarter coming up real soon, and then we will keep our eyes on 1001 Odysseys in the hopefully not too distant future, and touch back on that once it's ready to play. But for this week, that's going to be everything. So make sure you check us out on Facebook. We are going to be posting this, of course, as well as our questions of the day and everything else that goes up there. You can find us on Twitter, post there many times a day, as well as the Board Game Geek Guild 1735, where you will find not only these episodes, but Board Gamers Anonymous episodes, our questions of the day, and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. If you haven't had a chance yet, check out iTunes, leave us a quick review and a 5-star rating. We would love that. Helps us rise in the ratings and reach more people who either don't realize how big of a community we have here or are eager to find other people to share it with. But for this week, that's going to be everything. And until next time, we will save you a seat at this Table for One.
Late, everybody.